Marvel Studios made it pretty clear that Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame would not only be the end of Phase 4 of the MCU, but also wrap up many of the stories that started all the way back in 2008 when they first kicked off the MCU with Iron Man. For this reason, some of the longest serving actors have decided to retire their suits, including Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. While Downey's character Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, died after sacrificing himself for his team, Evans' character Steve Rogers, aka the Cap, was surprisingly not killed off. But despite being the first Avenger, it seems like Marvel is still looking to exclude Steve Rogers, and here are 7 reasons why they want to remove Captain America from the MCU. There's no denying that Steve Rogers is handsome, has some pretty cool moves with his shield, and is usually the hero who takes the moral high road. As his name suggests, Captain America is a patriotic leader and the type of guy who tries to keep the team together and make sure everyone stays on track. However, while he is an honest guy and usually makes the right decision, he has rubbed some people the wrong way on occasion. Back in Civil War, for instance, Steve got into an argument with Tony Stark, fighting about the amount of control the government should have over what they are doing. The Cap was leaning more towards the political right, demanding freedom for the Avengers so they could defend humanity without government interference. Tony Stark, on the other hand, took a more leftist stand, arguing that the government should have a certain control over the Avengers and should hold them accountable for collateral damages resulting from their many street fights with various villains. Of course, everyone agrees that the Cap is a stand-up guy who has the best intentions, but his political views certainly don't agree with the general opinion in Hollywood. His views are simply too conservative for today's political atmosphere, which has cost him quite a few popularity points. While no one is opposed to his patriotism and the fact that he is trying to protect the country he loves, the fact that he doesn't seem to care if civilians get killed in his fight for freedom is going too far for some, and Marvel Studios seem to know that the time has come to say goodbye to this hero, at least for now. Steve Rogers' conservative views can obviously be explained by the fact that he is a product of his time, since he was asleep for 50 years, during which the world changed a whole lot and he never got a chance to adapt. However, even with this in mind, he is less popular than his fellow Avengers for one simple reason: his backstory isn't half as interesting as theirs. The Cap is obviously a good guy, but this also makes him a little boring compared to some of his teammates. Take Thor, for example, who has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and we are not just talking about his hair. He has gone from a funny golden boy to an orphan that has endured a lot of pain and made a lot of sacrifices, which have made him a pretty deep character. Then there is Tony Stark, the ingenious billionaire, who has evolved from a playboy to a one-woman guy and from an arms dealer to a superhero. Natasha Romanoff, who is a ballerina and an assassin. Bruce Banner, who is a genius and a monster, and even the god of mischief, Loki, is a deep and complex character compared to what we have seen of Steve Rogers. The Cap does have a backstory that sounds promising, being a super soldier, then being frozen for half a century before being brought into a team of superpowered individuals, but even though it sounds like he would be an interesting character, it pretty much stops there. Rogers is the reliable nice guy that is so focused on doing the right thing that he seems to forget to have fun. Even Chris Evans admitted that he initially had doubts about accepting the role. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he said that he turned the role down twice, partly because there's no real darkness to him. The actor added, "I don't get jokes, I'm not Wolverine. I don't have dead parents like Batman. I'm just like, hi, I'll walk your dog, I'll help you move." Although the Marvel Cinematic Universe is based on the Marvel Comics, there are a lot of differences when it comes to characters' storylines, as well as their development. However, producer Kevin Feige and his team at Marvel Studios still depend on the comics as a guideline for how far they can take a certain development, and based on this, they could have easily got away with simply killing off Captain America. In fact, the comic books already set an example of this when, at the command of Red Skull, the villain of the first Captain America movie and his neo-Nazi nemesis, Crossbones shot and killed Steve Rogers during the opening act of the story. There, Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, is the one who comes to save the day after the Cap is fatally wounded. And even though Rogers didn't die in the MCU, many believe that Bucky Barnes could be his successor based on this storyline in the comics as well as his development in the MCU. As we just mentioned, Marvel didn't kill off Captain America and instead opted for a different way of possibly removing the character from the MCU, but Bucky Barnes still seems to be the frontrunner for taking his place. He was friends with Steve Rogers way back in the day, but his story is a bit more interesting and his character seems to have a bit more depth to it. First of all, he's not just the good guy, as he's a former super soldier assassin, trained, brainwashed, and armed with a new cybernetic arm to fight for the truly bad guys. Barnes was then left to not only figure out life in the 21st century, but also as a person with a conscience who doesn't just blindly follow orders anymore. However, Bucky Barnes is not the only possible successor, as Steve Rogers himself chose Sam Wilson, aka Falcon, to pass his shield onto. He was the one who assisted Rogers in tracking down his close friend, the Winter Soldier, who had been brainwashed, and Falcon also stood by the Cap during the Avengers Civil War, meaning he could be a worthy successor that also has plenty of potential to become a more interesting character than nice guy Steve Rogers ever managed to become. The Marvel comic books have a history of replacing their biggest heroes, turning Jane Foster into Thor, Falcon into Captain America, and having African-American teen genius Riri Williams taking over for Iron Man. But sooner or later, the original status quo would always be restored. This obviously doesn't work in the movie world, and swapping back actors such as Robert Downey Jr. or Chris Evans in a few years is pretty unlikely. The other options would be to promote other actors and characters into their positions, making Bucky Barnes the new Captain America for instance, or to simply hire new actors to replace the old ones, the same way franchises like James Bond or Doctor Who have done it for years. However, one has replacing its star built into the concept, and both center around one character instead of many, so it seems unlikely for Marvel Studios to go with this option and present us with an Avengers film featuring half old faces and half new faces pretending to be old. Instead, they are more likely to keep introducing new characters, completely reinventing the old ones, or treating them as positions to be filled on a team, for example, which is why it is unlikely that Steve Rogers will make another appearance as Captain America in the future. It was no surprise when Chris Evans finally bowed out, as he has made it pretty clear over the last few years that while he loved playing Captain America, he is also ready to leave him behind and move on to different projects. In fact, Evans not only fulfilled his 6-movie contract, but actually stayed for one additional film. The actor played the clean-cut Avenger for 8 years, and while fans still hoped until the last minute that he might surprise us all and change his mind, a tweet celebrating his final day of Avengers 4 reshoots left no doubt that Evans would really retire from the MCU. He wrote, "Playing this role over the last 8 years has been an honor. To everyone in front of the camera, behind the camera, and in the audience, thank you for the memories. Eternally grateful." In an interview with the New York Times, the actor also said, "You want to get off the train before they push you off," which sounds like Marvel would have removed the Cap from the MCU sooner or later anyway, and Evans surely made the right decision to gracefully bow out before Marvel Studios would decide the time of his departure for him. It is probably safe to say that nearly everyone expected Captain America to die in Avengers Endgame, not only because Chris Evans had fulfilled his contract and was not interested in continuing to play the role, but also because Marvel teased multiple deaths in the film itself. Fans expected Cap to be the one to sacrifice himself for the good of the team, and they were pretty surprised that Marvel decided to go a different way and keep him alive instead. Endgame writers Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely had a clear vision for Captain America's story, and even though they disagreed with directors Joe and Anthony Russo on some of their finer details, they eventually found a compromise. One of the most controversial aspects of Steve Rogers' story was his decision to remain in the past when he went back in time to replace all the Infinity Stones, in order to live out the rest of his days alongside the love of his life, Peggy Carter. While the writers felt his decision would have no impact on the future timeline as long as Steve didn't change anything, the Russo brothers disagreed. As the film ultimately explained it, Steve's decision to remain in the 1940s and marry Peggy created an alternate timeline, and there is no way of knowing what that could mean for the future. By not giving Steve Rogers an explicit death, Marvel kept a back door open, or rather opened a new door, because it seems unlikely that Chris Evans will return to play the role of Captain America again, but it could mean that Marvel plans to completely reinvent the character, as we previously mentioned, even if it might just be for the small screen.
Thank you for checking this video out, and don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe for new videos every day. Turn that bell notification on and comment down below that you subscribed, and we'll make sure to reply and